The scene opens with a couple sharing a warm, intimate moment, but it turns out to be nothing more than a memory. One that now haunts a disheveled man sitting alone on a train, clutching a bottle like a vagrant. Before long, his solitude is disturbed by a group of troublemakers who start harassing other passengers, even managing to scare some of them off. One of the thugs, a man named Anton, approaches the homeless man with the intent to mess with him. But when Anton tries to grab the bottle from his hand, he's shocked as the man's grip tightens around his wrist with incredible strength. Enraged, Anton calls his friends over to beat the vagrant up. Unfortunately for them, they have no idea who they're dealing with. In an instant, the supposed homeless man turns the tables, easily overpowering all of them and leaving them beaten and helpless. Without hesitation, he grabs Anton by the throat, choking him until the man is trembling in fear. The commotion attracts the attention of the police, who bring everyone involved to the station for questioning. Detective Carter takes charge of the investigation, speaking to each suspect, including the mysterious vagrant. When Carter asks for his name, the man remains silent. Carter presses further, saying that from the surveillance footage he's reviewed, he's certain this man isn't just some random nobody. Again, the vagrant stays quiet, prompting Carter to lecture him. He tells the man that he's met plenty of people like him, people who take justice into their own hands, and that he seems to have a habit of punishing those he deems guilty. Carter then shows him the footage of how brutally he handled the gang on the train. After finally taking the man's fingerprints, Carter leaves the interrogation room. Moments later, a lawyer arrives, claiming to represent the homeless man. While Carter runs the fingerprints through the database, he and his partner are stunned by the results. The man is connected to half a dozen criminal cases and has somehow evaded prosecution in 4 different countries. They realize they may have captured a grim reaper in human form. Unbeknownst to Carter, the vagrant has already been released from custody and picked up by a sleek, black luxury car. Carter rushes to catch up, but the mysterious man is already gone. The vagrant is soon brought before a well-dressed man who seems to know everything about him. The man introduces himself as Finch, and finally calls the vagrant by his real name, Reese. Shocked, Reese demands to know how Finch learned his identity. Finch simply replies that Reese doesn't need to ask questions. What he needs isn't a therapist or pills or alcohol. What he truly needs is a purpose. More specifically, Finch says a job. They move to another location, where Finch explains his mission. He asks Reese, what separates 8 million people from one another? He goes on to say that none of them know what's coming, who might live, who might die. That's exactly why he's doing what he does, to save lives. But Finch admits he can't do it alone. He needs Reese's help. He reveals that he has a long list of people who are either in danger of being murdered or abducted. At the top of that list is a woman named Diane Hansen, the same woman they see at that moment, buying a cup of coffee at a cafe in Starling. Watching her walk away, Reese assumes Finch is just another rich man with too much time on his hands. Maybe Diane is his ex-wife, or someone he once admired from afar. Either way, Reese says it's not his problem and refuses to get involved. As Reese tries to leave, Finch's men attempt to stop him, but he quickly overpowers them, leaving both groaning in pain. Later, Reese returns to a small, run-down apartment. While cleaning himself up, he watches a news report showing police sketches of a wanted homeless man. A sketch that looks exactly like him. As he drinks the last of his alcohol, exhaustion overtakes him, and he slowly passes out. In his sleep, he dreams of his lost lover, the only person who ever stayed by his side. Suddenly, he wakes up in a lavish bedroom, his hands tied. A calm voice fills the room, Finch's voice. He tells Reese that sometimes, people are forced to do things they don't want to, like saving a life. Then, Reese hears a woman screaming for help. Panicked, He breaks a lamp and uses the shard to cut himself free. He rushes to the door and kicks it open, only to realize the screams were coming from a recording. Finch stands there, explaining that Reese is too late. The woman in the recording died 3 years ago, murdered by her own husband for insurance money, including the time Reese failed to save Jessica while he was touring halfway around the world. Hearing Finch say the name of the person Reese loved made him furious. He demanded to know how Finch could possibly know about Jessica. Finch pressed couldn't or wouldn't explain exactly how he had obtained Reese's private information. What he insisted on was this: they were not too late to save Diane Hansen. Reluctantly, Reese agreed to follow Finch. Finch led him down an underground rail tunnel and explained that it was the way into a government-closed library. By coincidence, the library had been bought by a bank Finch controlled. The bank had since gone bankrupt, so the property was effectively an off-the-books asset. In that secret place, Finch issued Reese a driver's license, a credit card, and 6 assumed names. On Finch's desk, Reese saw dozens of phone numbers and dozens of photographs pinned up, faces Finch monitored constantly. Reese guessed those numbers were Social Security, style IDs linked to criminal records. Finch admitted he didn't always know exactly whose numbers they were. He also admitted his investigations were incomplete, but he insisted his information was reliable. Their immediate task was to save Diane Hansen, who, Finch warned, could turn out to be either a victim or a perpetrator. They tailed her relentlessly. Finch's dossier said Diane was an assistant district attorney, single, and likely had 2 or 3 people who might hold grudges against her. Finch instructed Reese to enable GPS tracking on Diane's phone and to install a wireless camera to monitor her home. With those tools in place, they could watch her every move. After installing the gear, Reese realized that from Diane's job, she probably had hundreds of people who disliked her. Still, using his instincts and experience, Reese narrowed the threat down to 2 primary suspects. The first was a colleague named Wheeler. They had once dated, and after Diane ended the relationship, Wheeler repeatedly tried to contact her. The second was a man called Pope, who was accused of killing a friend during a drug deal. Diane was handling the case against him. Reese shadowed Diane even during Pope's trial. He listened closely to everything she said in court and to her conversations with a police witness. At times, Diane sounded like she was arguing for a fair outcome rather than pushing to lock Pope away at all costs, even telling the officer she would try to keep Pope from being imprisoned if he was not actually guilty. Concerned by that ambiguity, Diane went to the prison to speak with Pope in person. Reese followed at a distance and eavesdropped on their conversation by tapping long-range audio. Diane said she believed Pope hadn't actually murdered his friend, that he was protecting someone. When she asked Pope whom he was protecting, he fell silent. The tone of the conversation suddenly shifted, and Pope lunged at Diane. Reese was about to intervene, but police arrived at the scene before he could step in. After hearing what he'd heard, Reese told Finch that whoever had framed Pope might now be targeting Hansen, and that only Pope's brother knew the identity of the real perpetrator. The scene cut to a flashback of Reese and Jessica together. A few minutes earlier, Jessica had asked her mother for permission to go on a trip with a friend named Cindy. They spent time together and later watched television coverage of the plane attacks on the World Trade Center on September 11th. Back in the present, Reese continued to monitor Diane. Wheeler tried once more to approach her and was rebuffed, but Reese discovered Wheeler was attempting to trace the whereabouts of Pope's brother, Michael. Reese suspected Wheeler might be colluding with the real killer. Not wanting Wheeler or anyone else to find Michael first, Reese took matters into his own hands and kidnapped Michael before anyone else could reach him. When Reese confronted Michael, the younger man panicked and tried to run. He screamed for help, attracting the attention of nearby workers, but he didn't completely lose his composure. He slipped his phone into his bag and then returned to the hideout. There he looked for a firearm, convinced that being armed would give him a better chance of surviving whatever was coming next. Fortunately, Reese still remembered an old acquaintance, Anton. At that moment, Anton and his crew were in the middle of an arms deal, surrounded by crates of heavy weaponry. Suddenly, without warning, Reese appeared in front of them alone, greeting them calmly. His sudden presence left the arms dealers confused. Mistaking Reese for a threat, everyone in the room immediately pointed their guns at him. But Reese showed no fear. Instead, he casually gave advice to one man about how to properly hold his weapon, mocking his sloppy technique. Before anyone could react, Reese swiftly disarmed the man, seized his gun, and demonstrated how to use it correctly, by shooting each of them in the leg until they were writhing helplessly on the ground. Anton stood frozen in shock, unable to move or speak. Without hesitation, Reese picked up several of the weapons, slung them over his shoulder, and walked away as if nothing had happened. Later, while sitting in a taxi, Reese received a call from Finch. He told him that they were too late. Michael had already been kidnapped by the killers. Reese remained calm as ever. He paid the driver, pulled a balaclava over his face, and waited by the roadside. When the kidnapper's car appeared, Reese opened fire, hitting the vehicle and causing it to roll over. He then rushed in, pulled Michael from the wreck, and took him to safety. The next day, Reese tracked the men who had kidnapped Michael and saw one of them meeting with the same police officer who had testified during Pope's trial. Reese immediately concluded they were dealing with a ring of corrupt cops. He began to wonder what kind of operation Finch had dragged him into. Finch then explained that he had hired Reese not just for a single case, but because he needed help saving millions of lives. Still skeptical, Reese demanded to know where Finch got all his information. Finch hesitated, but finally revealed the truth. During the 9/11 attacks, Finch had been in his office watching the tragedy unfold, while Reese was staying in a hotel in Mexico. In the aftermath, the U.S. government commissioned a surveillance system capable of reading emails and listening to phone calls, designed to prevent future terrorist attacks. And the person who built that system was Finch. Originally, the machine was programmed to detect large-scale threats, terrorist plots, mass violence, anything that could cause major loss of life. But soon Finch realized it was also identifying countless smaller crimes involving individual victims. To manage this, he reprogrammed the system to separate threats into two categories: relevant and non-relevant. Relevant cases, those posing national-level danger, were sent automatically to government agencies like the FBI. But the non-relevant cases, the ones involving only a single person, were ignored. Yet Finch couldn't ignore them. Something inside him compelled him to act. Those were the people he decided to save himself. Now, the machine's data might be in the government's hands, but its eyes, cameras, microphones, sensors were everywhere, watching with 10,000 unseen lenses. The fact that it had flagged Diane Hansen's number meant something was definitely wrong. Reese told Finch that he couldn't guarantee Diane's safety. He couldn't predict every threat, nor be everywhere at once. Finch replied that he hadn't hired Reese because the job was easy, but because it was necessary. Meanwhile, at the police precinct, Detective Carter was about to enter her office when her partner stopped her with surprising news. Anton, the same man they had previously arrested, was in trouble again. According to witnesses, Anton and his associates were making an arms deal when a mysterious man in a suit stormed in. And somehow, the weapons seemed to turn against their owners as if by magic. Intrigued, Carter decided to investigate the strange case herself. Around the same time, Finch discovered that Pope had been murdered, stabbed to death in prison. It was clear that someone was covering their tracks. Fearing Diane Hansen was the next target, Finch urged Reese to find her immediately. Reese tracked Diane and followed her down a narrow alleyway. With his gun ready, he prepared to intervene. But then he saw something that shattered all their assumptions. Diane wasn't the victim. She was the perpetrator. From his vantage point, Reese saw Diane meeting with Stills, the man who had kidnapped Michael. The two were calmly discussing Pope's death. While Reese was trying to process what he was seeing, a corrupt cop suddenly appeared behind him, holding him at gunpoint. Reese was disarmed and handed over to Stills. Not wanting any witnesses, Diane instructed Stills to take care of everything, including killing Wheeler. Reese was beaten unconscious and dragged into a car. When he woke up, he was tied up in the back seat. The corrupt cop who had captured him was driving toward a remote beach, clearly planning to execute him there. Unfortunately for the cop, he had no idea that Reese was a former CIA operative. Reese warned him of two things. First, he didn't take kindly to being hurt. And second, the cop should probably relearn how to restrain a prisoner properly. In a split second, Reese turned the tables, triggering an explosive device that flipped the car into the air and sent it crashing violently to the ground. After flipping the car, Reese dragged the corrupt cop out of the wreckage and coldly asked if he was wearing a bulletproof vest. The officer nodded weakly, and Reese shot him 3 times in the chest, knocking him unconscious. Finch, who had been anxiously waiting for an update, finally received a call from Reese. Reese reported that Diane was actually the mastermind behind the murders, while Wheeler, the man they had suspected, was in fact a victim. Meanwhile, Diane's men were preparing to kill Wheeler. They had even arranged for a fake hitman, a former inmate whom Wheeler had once sent to prison, to take the blame. As Wheeler and his son stepped out of the elevator, the ambush was ready. But just in time, Reese arrived. In an instant, he turned the situation around, gunning down Diane's henchmen with deadly precision. Despite his ruthless efficiency, Reese still showed a trace of mercy. He ordered one of the wounded thugs to take his injured partner to the hospital. Then, with no hesitation, he finished off Stills, leaving him incapacitated and bleeding on the ground. The next day, during a court hearing between Diane and Wheeler, Diane presented what she claimed was key audio evidence to the judge. But when the recording was played, it had been replaced. Instead of Wheeler's supposed confession, the tape contained Diane's own voice ordering her men to assassinate Wheeler. Her corruption was finally exposed. With the truth out, Reese and Finch successfully closed the case. Later, Reese met Finch at a quiet park. As Finch sat by the lake, Reese asked him a question that had been bothering him. "Why me? Why did you choose me?" Finch looked out over the water and calmly replied, "Because, Mr. Reese, we're both already dead to the world." He went on to explain that he could easily pay Reese enough money to disappear forever, if all Reese wanted was to do one job and walk away. But if Reese chose to stay, he needed to understand that what they were doing would eventually get them both killed. "At least," Finch said, turning to face him, "before that happens, we can do some good." The scene closed with Detective Carter arresting Diane's surviving henchman, while from a distance, Reese watched quietly, ensuring that justice had finally been served. The scene shifts to a man entering an elevator, joining 2 well-dressed men who were already inside. Just as the doors were about to close, Reese suddenly steps in and rides down with them. Inside, Reese tries to make small talk with one of the men. He asks if the flowers he's holding are for his wife. The man nods politely, and Reese casually remarks that he thought his wife preferred roses. Annoyed by Reese's intrusion, the man snaps back, threatening to fire him if he works for his company. Unfazed, Reese calmly replies that not every woman who's been cheated on stays silent. Sometimes, he says, a wife will go as far as hiring 2 men to hurt her unfaithful husband. His words make the 2 men behind him tense up, clearly realizing he's talking about them. Before they can draw their guns, Reese acts first, swiftly killing both of them and saving the man's life. Once the mission is complete, Reese calls Finch, asking if the machine has found a new number. He's eager for another case after rescuing the cheating husband. What Reese doesn't realize is that Finch is actually nearby. The two are talking on the phone from just a short distance apart. However, Finch is fully aware that Reese is tailing him. When Finch changes direction, Reese loses sight of him. Finch then reminds him that they'll meet on his schedule, not Reese's. Meanwhile, Detective Carter is handling another mysterious case, once again involving men in suits. This time, Carter impresses her colleagues by correctly deducing the details of a double murder before the police report is even read out. Back to Reese and Finch. The two meet again, and Finch explains that the machine has identified a new number, a 15-year-old girl named Teresa Whitaker. The problem is, Teresa was reported dead, along with her entire family, 2 years ago. Reese speculates that they might be chasing a ghost, but Finch isn't convinced. Meanwhile, a man arrives at a tall building, Finch's private hideout. Finch, who had been exercising, stops when he learns that his company has just won another major award. As it turns out, Finch is so reclusive that he hires someone else to pretend to be the company's owner in public. This imposter isn't just anyone. He's one of Finch's trusted associates, someone who also knows about Finch's secret system, the one he built for the government. Finch explains that the system only tracks people through their social security numbers, but in reality, it's capable of much more than anyone realizes. Later, Finch meets Reese by a river and hands him a file detailing the Whitaker family's deaths. According to the report, Teresa's father, Grant Whitaker, was a real estate developer who owned 14 buildings. One day, he took his family on a boat trip, and according to police records, he shot his wife and daughter before turning the gun on himself. However, investigators only recovered the bodies of Grant and his wife. Teresa's body was never found. This leads Finch to insist that the machine doesn't make mistakes. If it flagged Teresa's number, then she must still be alive. But if that's true, her life is in grave danger. Knowing he'll need help from law enforcement, Reese approaches Detective Lionel Fusco. Remember him? The same corrupt cop whose life Reese once spared. Seeing Reese again immediately annoys Lionel, but he also knows he owes him his life. Without wasting time, Reese orders him to retrieve the police files on Grant Whitaker's so-called suicide case from 2 years ago at Bowery Beach. After assigning the task to Lionel, Reese meets Finch again to discuss how Teresa could have survived the murder. Reese suspects a professional hit, but Finch has another theory. Maybe Teresa simply wasn't there when it happened. Reese then asks Finch to interview Teresa's aunt, while he tracks down Deacon, a boy who was once Teresa's friend. Finch proceeds to visit the aunt, pretending to be a lawyer handling the family's insurance claim. After a polite conversation, he learns a shocking truth. The family knowingly buried an empty coffin for Teresa. The police had told them her body would eventually disintegrate. But deep down, they all knew the coffin was empty. Meanwhile, Reese finally locates the boy he's been searching for. Flashing his badge, he demands to know where Teresa is. The boy, angry after being knocked into, snaps back that Teresa is dead. But at that exact moment, Reese receives a signal from a nearby ATM. A sign that someone matching Teresa's identity has just made a withdrawal. Sure enough, when he scans the area, Reese spots Teresa withdrawing cash. He rushes toward her, but she notices him and quickly escapes before he can catch up. Reese then heads to Finch's office, where most employees have no idea that Finch is actually their real boss. When they meet, the two immediately exchange information. Reese proudly reports that Teresa Whitaker is alive. He explains that she's been supporting herself through a scam known as skimming, using fake card readers to steal money from others. After Finch sends Reese off for his next move, Reese meets with Detective Lionel Fusco again, who's ready to assist him. This time, their target is a shop that secretly connects clients with hitmen for hire. Without hesitation, Reese walks in. At first, he's thrown out. But when he re-enters, he swiftly eliminates the armed criminals inside, leaving none standing, and discovers a lead. One name tied to the Whitaker murders. Following the clue, Reese tracks down the hitman in prison to question him about who ordered the killing of Grant Whitaker and his family. At first, the hitman refuses to talk, claiming he doesn't even know who Reese is. But when Reese mentions a young girl named Teresa, the man's expression changes. He finally understands why Reese is there. It turns out this hitman has a personal rule. He never kills women or children. That's why he spared Teresa's life, a fact well known among his clients. After obtaining the information he needs, Reese leaves the prison to continue his investigation. Shortly after, Finch calls to report a breakthrough. He's traced suspicious financial transactions under Grant's name. One of them involves a company called Landale, which had been working with Grant on real estate projects. Reese heads straight to Landale's offices. There, he's stunned to see someone unexpected, Derek, Teresa's uncle. Before Reese can confront him, Finch alerts him that Teresa's card has just been used again. Reese immediately changes course to find her. When he arrives, he spots Teresa mid-transaction. As soon as she sees him, she panics and runs, terrified and unwilling to trust anyone. Just as Reese tries to calm her down, a mysterious armed man suddenly appears and points his gun at them. Thanks to Reese's lightning-fast reflexes, he retaliates immediately, leading to a brutal fight. Both men exchange blows and gunfire until Reese gains the upper hand, shooting the attacker multiple times until he collapses. After the fight, Reese chases Teresa again, assuring her that he's only trying to protect her, not harm her. Eventually, he brings her to a safe apartment, telling her she'll be fine. Finch will stay with her. As for Reese, he has another mission. He kidnaps Derek to extract the truth about the Whitaker family's murder. During the interrogation, Derek insists he never had any conflict with Grant. Their family had been on good terms until Landale entered the picture. The company, he says, started pressuring Grant to hand over certain real estate holdings. Grant initially agreed to cooperate, but later decided to keep several properties under his daughter's name, Teresa Whitaker. That's when everything changed. Teresa became a target because her name held the legal claim to valuable properties that Landale desperately wanted. When Reese mentions that Teresa is still alive, Derek is stunned. He can hardly believe it. He had witnessed Landale's men killing the Whitaker family himself. Reese doesn't respond to Derek's pleas. He simply orders him to confess to his involvement and clear the Whitaker family's name. Back at the apartment, Finch speaks gently to Teresa, explaining who he is and why he's hiding her. He also tells her that her aunt misses her dearly and still keeps a photo of them together. Then comes a flashback to 2007, the moment Finch first created the machine. One of his colleagues doubted its potential, calling it a foolish idea, insisting that no machine could possibly protect every human life. But Finch believed otherwise. He said, "We don't have to save everyone, only those who can still be saved." The machine had already proven its worth by preventing numerous terrorist attacks, and Finch was certain his creation could change the world. Meanwhile, Derek returns home, only to find a Landale hitman waiting for him. The assassin demands to know where Teresa is. When Derek refuses to answer, the man pulls out his gun, aiming it directly at Derek's head. Meanwhile, Reese calls Finch to report that Landale is completely insane. They've discovered that the property purchased by Teresa's father is worth $50 million, and now they want to claim it all for themselves. Reese informs Finch that he's currently tracking Calhoun, the leader of Landale's operations, as he heads to a secret location. Once there, Reese listens in on their conversation. Calhoun and his men are discussing how to finalize the deal and take control of Teresa's land as soon as possible. Back at Derek's house, things take a dark turn. Still refusing to reveal any information, Derek is executed with a silenced pistol. Meanwhile, Teresa, who has slipped away from Finch's supervision, makes a fatal mistake. She tries to call her aunt, unknowingly allowing the assassin to trace her phone's signal and locate her exact position. As this happens, Reese continues tailing Calhoun. Without hesitation, he rams Calhoun's car, forcing him to stop. Holding him at gunpoint, Reese demands that he call off his men and order them not to harm Teresa. But Calhoun coldly replies that it's too late. It's already done. Panic floods Reese's face. He immediately calls Finch, warning him to hide because the hitman is already on his way. And sure enough, Finch spots the assassin entering the hallway of the building. Desperately, Finch turns off all the lights, hoping to mislead him. But it's no use. The assassin still manages to track them through the darkness. Finch, limping and unable to run fast, grabs Teresa and leads her through the corridors until they reach a dead end. With nowhere left to go, they brace for the worst as the hitman slowly approaches. Just as he raises his gun to fire, 2 gunshots echo through the air, hitting the assassin squarely in the chest. He collapses instantly. The shots came from Reese, who arrived just in time to save Finch and Teresa's lives. Later, the scene shifts to Detective Carter, who receives a mysterious phone call from Reese. Over the line, he tells her that he wants to meet in person, so she can finally know who he really is. The next day, Carter arranges for several agents to monitor the area, ready to catch the mysterious man in the suit. But Reese is too clever. Instead of revealing himself, he simply leaves Teresa in Carter's care. From a distance, Reese and Finch quietly watch as Carter takes Teresa away to safety. At the police station, Teresa is reunited with her aunt, who breaks down in tears and hugs her tightly. Meanwhile, Reese decides to visit Finch's office, but when he arrives, one of the employees informs him that Harold, Finch's alias, has been fired by upper management. Moments later, Finch himself calls Reese. His voice is calm but firm as he clarifies one thing. "From now on, Mr. Reese, I'll be the one to contact you, not the other way around." Finch knows Reese has been following him. To make sure he can't be traced again, Finch destroys all his remaining records and disappears into the crowd. Then we see a shot of a statue of the company's founder, the man who was officially declared dead back in 2010, leaving behind only his legend and his machine. Then, the scene shifts to Reese, who surprises Finch while he's sleeping at his desk. Reese explains that he wants to apologize for ruining Finch's undercover work, and now he plans to offer him a new job. However, Finch tells him that they already have a new case to handle. He explains that the machine has just produced a new number, someone who may be in serious trouble. That person is Joey Durban, a former soldier from the 107th Infantry who recently returned from Iraq. Now, Joey works as a valet at a high-end restaurant. Before leaving to observe Joey's movements, Reese jokingly advises Finch to get some exercise. He then heads to a nearby building to keep an eye on Joey. From Joey's behavior and movements, Reese can tell that he's quick, disciplined, and observant. However, not long after, Reese sees Joey saying goodbye to one of his friends and leaving the area. When Reese follows him, he discovers that Joey is meeting his girlfriend, Pia Moresco, the woman who waited 6 years for him while he was deployed. Pia is the kind of woman Reese once dreamed of having. For 8 straight hours, Reese tails Joey everywhere he goes. Joey's actions seem harmless. He visits a toy store, then heads to a bank. But when Reese follows him inside, he's shocked to see Joey and several accomplices suddenly draw their guns, demanding everyone lie face down and stay quiet. Reese has no choice but to comply. He even stops a security guard from reaching for his weapon to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. After the robbers take the money and flee, Reese quickly disappears before the police arrive, not wanting to leave any trace of his presence. The scene flashes back to 2006, when Reese was at an airport and unexpectedly ran into Jessica again. At that time, Reese had just resigned from the CIA and taken on a new job, but he refused to tell Jessica what it was. Returning to the present, Reese reports the bank robbery to Finch. He's confused. Why would the machine flag a bank robber as a person of interest? But Finch insists that the system must have detected something important. Later, Reese observes Joey meeting another woman, not Pia, and handing her a thick envelope that likely contains cash. Reese secretly takes a photo of the woman as evidence. When Joey returns to work, a taxi pulls up, and the driver hands him another envelope. Luckily, Finch manages to trace the taxi's number and discovers the driver is Willis, the same man Reese saw during the robbery. After further investigation, they learn that Joey is part of a heist crew led by a former soldier named Sam Laminer. Without hesitation, Reese decides to infiltrate the group by posing as a retired agent looking for quick cash. He travels to Coney Island, where Sam runs a secret bar. After a long conversation, Sam begins to trust him and tells Reese to stay ready. He'll call when a job becomes available. Meanwhile, Finch sets a clever trap for Willis, the taxi driver. When Finch gets out of the cab, he reports to the police that there's an unregistered firearm in the trunk. As a result, Willis is arrested, which earns Reese a call from Sam to meet the rest of the crew. Following the instructions, Reese arrives at the location, but suddenly 3 masked men, Joey, Straub, and Teddy, kidnap him and take him to a hidden spot. They point their guns at him, clearly suspicious of his motives. Calmly, Reese explains that he's just a retired soldier desperate for money. He also mentions that he recognizes them from the 107th Infantry Unit, because in 2005, he was the one leading that division. Hearing that shocks Straub, and Reese proves it by mentioning that close teammates often share matching tattoos. Impressed, they finally accept him as part of the crew and give him a disposable phone for future contact. The next day, Reese discusses Joey's situation with Finch. He's puzzled. Joey has a beautiful girlfriend and a decent job, so why risk everything by committing crimes? That question is answered the following day when Reese trails Joey again and sees him meeting Pia. The warmth and affection between them make Reese think of Jessica, the woman he once loved and lost. At the airport meeting, Jessica admits that she's now engaged to a man named Peter. She explains that she waited for Reese for a very long time, hoping he would one day ask her to keep waiting, no matter how long it took. But since that never happened, she decided to move on with her life. Reese, not wanting to interfere with her happiness, simply wishes her the best and quietly walks away. Back in the present day, after meeting Pia, Joey visits the mysterious woman again. This time, she's with a young girl. It turns out that Joey has been financially supporting them. That's the reason he constantly needs money. At the police station, Detective Carter receives information from her colleague Molina, who managed to obtain a fingerprint belonging to the mysterious man in the suit. The print came from the grip of the security guard's gun used during the recent bank robbery. Instead of focusing on Reese, Carter becomes more interested in the military-grade equipment used by the robbers. She's convinced that such communication gear isn't something they could have bought anywhere legally. Meanwhile, after leaving the woman and child, Joey heads into a bar, where Reese is already waiting for him. As usual, Reese tries to test Joey, asking whether he's been following him, since, as far as Reese knows, they were only supposed to meet if Sam called. Joey explains that he lives nearby, which calms the tension, and they end up sitting together at the bar. Over drinks, they begin to open up about their struggles, how life after the military has been painfully difficult. Not long after, 2 arrogant bankers approach them, mocking both Reese and Joey for being former soldiers. They call them mere volunteers who aren't worth remembering by their country. Angered by their words, Reese punches one of them in the face, and Joey quickly joins in. After that, they leave the bar together. During the walk, Joey finally reveals why he's doing all of this. He and his friends are struggling financially. In particular, Straub has lost a lot of money due to gambling, which is why he was so eager when Sam called with a new job opportunity. Joey then says goodbye, needing to return to work. But what Joey said about Straub piques Reese's interest, prompting him to keep an eye on him. Later, Straub is seen visiting Sam, asking for another job because the money from the last heist wasn't enough to cover his debts. Impatient, Straub pressures Sam, who finally offers him a new mission, a high-risk, high-reward job, robbing a major casino. Straub asks whether Sam will still take a 50% cut, even if they end up killing someone. Without hesitation, Sam answers yes, reminding them that he's the leader of their unit, and they must follow orders to complete the mission. After their conversation, Straub leaves the bar. Back at the police station, Molina successfully traces the source of the robbers' military equipment and identifies one of the crew members, Teddy, a retired soldier who turned to criminal work. Carter instructs Molina to contact her immediately if he finds any more information on Teddy's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Reese calls Finch, asking for his help as he's now been picked up by the crew for an upcoming job. Finch promises to warn him just before anything goes wrong, before Reese gets hurt. Reese and the team ride in a van toward their target. Once they arrive, Reese feels uneasy, especially after Finch informs him that the plan is doomed to fail because the police already know about their movements. However, the stubborn Straub insists on going through with the plan anyway. They attack the casino, and chaos ensues. Shots are fired, people get hurt, and Reese scrambles to pull everyone out once he realizes the police are closing in. Straub is furious at Reese for aborting the mission, but since they have no other choice, the group retreats. When the crew regroups, Sam is enraged. He trusted Straub to lead the job, and now it's a disaster. Straub defends himself, claiming that Reese and Joey ruined everything by somehow knowing that the police would be there. Sam begins to suspect Reese and orders Straub to keep an eye on him, the new guy in their group. Later, back at their hideout, Finch informs Reese that he's uncovered something interesting. After checking Joey's bank records, Finch discovers that for the past 4 months, Joey has been making $10,000 payments for future planning, expenses tied to a young girl named Amy Myers, the daughter of Stacy Myers. Reese is confused. Why would Joey pay for this child's expenses? After digging deeper, he learns that Stacy's father, Frank Myers, was also a soldier who died in service. It turns out that Frank and Joey served in the same unit, and Joey is now repaying his debt to Frank by taking care of Frank's daughter. Wanting to learn more about Joey's past, Reese invites him to meet at a beach. There, Reese begins to gently ask about his history. Joey finally opens up. He and Frank were close friends during their deployment. One day, Joey was assigned to protect a foreign delegate. But just before the mission began, he knelt down to tie his bootlace, and Frank took his place in the formation. Moments later, a sniper's bullet rang out, killing Frank instantly. That guilt has haunted Joey ever since. Before Frank died, he often told Joey how excited he was to become a father, and how proud he would be once he and Stacy had their first child. That memory stayed with Joey. It became the reason he did everything he did. To repay his debt to Frank, the man who sacrificed his life to save him. After learning the truth about Joey's kindness, the next day Reese visits Pia at her workplace. He casually starts a conversation, speaking highly of Pia's boyfriend, saying how lucky she is to have such a good man. Reese even teases her a little, complimenting her beauty and saying Joey should never take her for granted. Pia, however, remains loyal and firm. She replies that no matter what happens, she will always stay with Joey. Later, Reese contacts Finch, asking him to call the police once the mission with the gang begins. This time, the mission is far more dangerous. Finch manages to intercept a conversation between Sam and his client, revealing that the target is the police station itself. Their goal: to steal a valuable piece of evidence stored inside. Finch warns Reese that this operation is a trap and advises him to expose the syndicate immediately. But Reese decides not to act too soon. He plays along with the group, planning to uncover more information before making his move. Once preparations are complete, Straub gathers the crew and explains their objective. They're only after one item, though he doesn't know exactly what it is. What he does know is that it's worth $400,000. The police station they plan to infiltrate is located in a busy downtown area, so they must move quickly. When they finally break in, chaos erupts. Unbeknownst to Reese, Finch is already inside, watching and waiting for the right moment to warn him. While Straub and Joey search for the mysterious item, Reese catches sight of Finch across the room. Through brief gestures, Finch silently communicates a warning. It's a setup. Sam plans to use them as scapegoats. Realizing this, Reese urges Straub to abort the mission and leave immediately. But Straub refuses to listen. He insists on grabbing the package first before retreating. As the crew attempts to escape, one of the police officers manages to shoot Teddy in the leg, slowing them down. The police quickly mobilize after detecting the break-in and pursue the robbers. When Straub finally brings the stolen item to Sam, things take a deadly turn. Sam shoots Straub on the spot, killing him instantly. Sam doesn't stop there. He opens fire on the rest of the crew, attempting to eliminate all witnesses. Fortunately, only Teddy is hit. Reese and Joey manage to hide and fight back, forcing Sam to retreat. After escaping, Reese tells Joey to disappear immediately before the police come after them. He also urges Joey to take Pia and leave the city for good. Not long after, the police discover the bodies of Straub and Teddy. Detective Carter examines the scene and finds the military radio equipment used by the gang for communication. The police are still unsure what the crew stole, but among the evidence, they find a small box labeled Elias M. The scene then shifts to Finch, who expresses disappointment that Reese lets Sam get away. But Reese calmly replies that Sam won't get far. And indeed, Reese is right. Moments later, Sam delivers a box of evidence, a few photos of victims and a sculpting tool, to his mysterious client. But when Reese later arrives at Sam's residence, he finds Sam dead, lying lifeless on his couch. Afterward, Reese contacts Detective Carter through the same military radio the robbers used. Carter, still curious about the mysterious man, tries to get him to reveal his face. But Reese refuses. The only thing Carter makes clear is that one day, she will catch him. Finally, the scene closes with Joey successfully convincing Pia to leave the city with him. As the two drive away together, their affection and laughter remind Reese of his own lost moments with Jessica, a bittersweet echo of the love he once had. Then the scene shifts to a doctor who is overwhelmed by the flood of patients, causing her to forget about one of them, a man named Harold. After being reminded by her assistant, she immediately approaches Harold to ask what seems to be the problem. Harold explains that he came to the doctor only to get a prescription. However, the doctor insists on checking his previous x-rays first. Harold firmly says he doesn't want another examination, just the prescription. After some hesitation, the doctor, whose name is Tillman, finally agrees to give him the prescription. While Megan is distracted, Harold takes advantage of the situation to secretly swap one of her belongings. Later that evening, after Dr. Megan finishes work, John begins to follow her. Both John and Harold are confused as to why Megan's name appeared on the machine's list, since she has no criminal record or behavioral issues. In fact, Megan is well-liked and friendly with her colleagues. That night, John sees Megan visiting a nightclub. There, he briefly investigates a man who tries to flirt with her. Once John confirms the man is harmless, he notices someone else accidentally bumping into Megan. John discreetly uses his skills to steal that man's business card and discovers his name, Andrew Benton. He also finds a vial of sedatives in Andrew's wallet. John suspects that Andrew isn't the only one following Dr. Megan. The next morning, John meets Harold again. Harold explains that after leaving the nightclub, Megan went straight back to the hospital to work and continued treating patients with full dedication. John then tells Harold that, according to the bartender, Megan has been visiting that nightclub every night for a week. John believes she may have attracted the attention of the wrong person, Andrew Benton, a banker with a disturbing history. Andrew has previously faced accusations of harassment, sexual assault, and even rape, though none were proven in court. John suspects Andrew is a sexual predator who intends to make Megan his next victim. Curious and cautious, John uses his expertise to infiltrate Andrew's office, hacking into his data and email accounts. Meanwhile, Detective Joss Carter reviews CCTV footage from the Center Street robbery and notices one of the men exchanging information with one of the robbers. Back at Harold's place, John and Harold go through Andrew's files and discover multiple photos of women who appear to have been his past victims. Unfortunately, they find nothing directly linking him to Dr. Megan. They then try to access Andrew's college records for more information, but the files have been erased. That leaves them with no choice but to seek access through other channels. John mentions that he has a way to get those records, but Harold expresses his disapproval. He doesn't want John working with Detective Lionel Fusco, a corrupt cop who once tried to kill John. John reassures Harold that Fusco isn't the only person who's tried to kill him, and besides, Fusco wouldn't dare cross him again. Elsewhere, Fusco is confronted by a group of drug dealers demanding repayment for drugs seized by the police. They tell him that his corrupt partners have already been arrested, leaving Fusco responsible for the loss. The dealers threaten him, saying that if they don't get their money back, they'll go after his child. That night, John resumes his surveillance on Megan and sees Andrew approaching her again. This time, it seems Andrew's advances are working. However, when Andrew invites her over, Megan politely declines, explaining that she has to work early in the morning. Disappointed, Andrew lets her go. After they part ways, John notices Megan secretly taking photos of Andrew and later following him to his house. The next day, Fusco meets with John and explains that he's there waiting for a drug dealer. John immediately asks about the records he requested. Fusco hesitates to hand them over, saying he's already done a lot for John and deserves some protection in return. John reminds him that corrupt cops like Fusco are everywhere in the city, and that he can easily find another one to help him. Hearing this, Fusco finally gives John the file. That night, John reveals what he's learned. Andrew once raped a college girl named Gabrielle Tillman, Megan's sister. Gabrielle had reported the assault, but the police couldn't find enough evidence to convict Andrew. A year later, Gabrielle was hospitalized after an overdose. With this revelation, Harold and John finally understand why the machine gave them Megan Tillman's name. John explains that Megan is a doctor who saves lives, which means she's not capable of taking one. Meanwhile, Detective Joss Carter visits a man named Burdett to obtain his testimony regarding the recent robbery. Carter begins questioning Mr. Burdett about what happened during the incident. Burdett explains the sequence of events, but Carter isn't satisfied with his answers. She then confronts him about being seen talking to one of the robbers. Burdett insists he only spoke briefly with the robber, begging for his life, nothing more. Carter then hands Burdett her business card, telling him to call if he remembers anything else about the case. That night, Harold calls John to ask where Dr. Megan Tillman is. John replies that Megan is still at work and that he's currently handling some side business. Harold also mentions that he recently met Carter. John explains that Carter is now motivated to solve the robbery case and warns that he needs a new plan before she tracks him down. He adds that he's working on it, currently looking for reinforcements to deal with both Carter and Detective Fusco. Then, he heads out to locate Megan. John arrives at a small gathering where people are sharing personal stories about women who were drugged and assaulted. Megan is among them, but she soon leaves the event. John follows and approaches her to start a conversation. Megan tells him she once knew someone who experienced the same tragedy as the woman in that story. She explains that, at first, she thought she had moved on from losing that person. But every time she sees the man responsible living freely, the pain resurfaces. Realizing she has shared too much with a stranger, Megan apologizes. John then introduces himself, and Megan does the same, using a fake name, Kate Lehman. The next morning, John visits the residence listed under the name Kate Lehman. Inside, he finds a chemical substance capable of dissolving a human body in just 3 hours. John tells Harold that Megan is not a killer, but Harold asks what they should do next. John insists that they need time to make Andrew disappear forever. That night, John decides to help Fusco by attacking the drug dealers who had been threatening him. He storms their hideout, defeats the gang, and uses the opportunity to steal their stash of drugs. After leaving Fusco, John hunts down Andrew Benton and knocks him unconscious. When Andrew wakes up, he finds himself in front of a police station, with a trunk full of drugs in his car. Unfortunately, John's plan fails. Andrew is released shortly after, protected by his 4 high-profile lawyers. Meanwhile, Megan listens to a recorded apology from her late sister. Later that night, Harold informs John that Megan is heading toward Andrew's residence, urging him to act quickly. But before John can intervene, he's ambushed by a group of vengeful drug dealers. At the same time, when Andrew arrives home, he's attacked by Megan. Without hesitation, she begins preparing to punish him for what he did. Elsewhere, John regains consciousness and finds Fusco nearby, revealing that Fusco had tipped off the drug dealers. John is assaulted repeatedly by their men, but he eventually overpowers them and escapes. Despite the betrayal, John forgives Fusco, warning him to stay out of trouble and saying he'll call when he needs him again. Later that night, Megan arrives at a cafe, unaware that John has caught up to her. He asks her to talk, explaining that he already knows who's inside her van. During their conversation, John calmly tells Megan that she's intelligent and careful, but if she goes through with this revenge, she'll never be able to live with what she's done. He reveals that he knows everything about her, including why she wants Andrew dead. John warns that killing him in cold blood will destroy her completely. He urges her to trust him instead, to give herself a chance at redemption, to live on in honor of her sister's memory. Moved by his words, Megan finally agrees and hands over the van keys to John. John drives away, with the unconscious Andrew still inside the vehicle. The next morning, Fusco is reassigned to the same precinct as Carter. Their superior explains the transfer, revealing that Fusco's former partner was caught in a scandal involving compromising photos with a call girl. Curious, Fusco asks Carter about the robbery case she's working on, marking the beginning of their professional partnership. The scene then shows Andrew just waking up from unconsciousness. He explains that a woman came to his house and electrocuted him. John calmly tells him that he was the one who asked the woman to leave. He explains that she doesn't belong in this situation. She's someone who saves lives, not takes them. John warns Andrew that people like him shouldn't be allowed to destroy someone as good as her. John then asks Andrew a question. Do you believe people can change? Andrew admits that he's made terrible mistakes. He swears that he wants to change and will never repeat the crimes he's committed. He then pleads with John not to kill him, saying that he can see goodness inside John, that John isn't a murderer. But Andrew's words only leave John conflicted. He hesitates, torn between giving Andrew another chance or ending his life right then and there. Finally, John tells him that the choice isn't his to make. It's Andrew's decision which path this moment will take.